Husband said I choose your sister. I said okay and calmly stopped paying sister rent. Now they know not to bite the hand that feeds them, and apologize, but I blocked. I'll never forget the way he said it, like he thought he was telling some profound truth. I choose your sister. 4 words. That's all it took to unravel everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed. It wasn't just the betrayal of my husband, it was the betrayal of my own sister. Barbara. The one I had bent over backwards for, financially, emotionally, and practically. It was like a slap in the face from both sides, one I never saw coming, although looking back now, the signs were there all along. Jason and I had been together for years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. I worked long hours at a high-stress job to keep us comfortable. Jason, on the other hand, hadn't worked in over a year. He claimed he was focused on being a stay-at-home dad to Mason, our 3-year-old, but I'll be honest, most of the parenting was still falling on me. Still, I told myself we were a team. I handled the money, the house, the big decisions, and he existed in the spaces I left him, or so I thought. Then there was Barbara. My sister. She was the golden one, slim, beautiful, charming in a way I wasn't. While I was out there struggling to keep everything afloat, she was out there, finding herself. That's what she called it when she couldn't get a job or figure out what she wanted in life. I paid her rent for years, helped her out when her bills piled up, and constantly gave her the kind of support she never seemed to give back. It always felt like I was picking up her pieces. And apparently, while I was busy doing that, she was sleeping with my husband. It all came crashing down one night. Jason had been acting strange for weeks, more irritable, more withdrawn. I assumed he was stressed or restless, maybe even a little resentful that I was working so much. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because that's what I always did. But that night, he sat me down as if he were going to make a heartfelt speech, and instead he dropped a bomb. I've been seeing Barbara for a while now, he said, like I should understand. 5 months. And I realized I chose her. I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. When I asked him how long he'd been planning to destroy our family, he didn't even flinch. He just shrugged. We're not a family anymore, not really, he said. You're always working, always stressed. You've taken on too much, and honestly, Barbara understands me in a way that you don't. She makes me feel alive again. Alive. That was the word he used, as if I'd sucked the life out of him by keeping a roof over our heads, paying all the bills, and raising our child while he played the role of reluctant stay-at-home dad. And Barbara? She made him feel alive, of course. She had nothing but free time and a rent-free apartment that I paid for. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I looked at him, then at Mason playing with his blocks in the next room, and I knew I couldn't afford to break down. So I nodded like I was agreeing to something mundane, like dinner plans. Okay, I said. Jason blinked at me, clearly expecting me to fight or beg or do something dramatic. Instead, I remained calm. I told him to pack his things and leave the house immediately. You can live out your fantasy with Barbara, I said, but don't expect to come back. And don't expect to have anything to do with Mason. You've already proven that you're not in your right mind. Jason, of course, tried to turn this around on me. He accused me of being selfish, of not appreciating how much he'd done for our family. I just stood there and watched him work himself into a self-righteous frenzy, trying to justify the unjustifiable. But I didn't give him the response he wanted. He left that night, suitcase in hand, and moved in with Barbara. And as soon as I saw his taillights disappear down the street, I picked up my phone and canceled the automatic rent payments I'd been making for her apartment. We'll see how long her little fantasy lasts without my money. It didn't take long for reality to set in. The first phone call came a week later. It was Barbara. She sounded desperate, asking me why her rent hadn't been paid. I calmly told her that I'd stopped covering it. You're an adult, I said. You're with Jason now. He can handle it. She stammered something about not being able to afford it, and how it wasn't fair to just cut her off like that. I reminded her that fairness went out the window the moment she decided to sleep with my husband. Then I hung up. The next call was from Jason. He started off angry, accusing me of trying to ruin their relationship out of spite. I laughed at that. You mean the relationship you built by stabbing me in the back? That relationship? I asked. Then I told him the same thing I had told Barbara. I wasn't paying for either of them anymore. You wanted to build a life together? Then go ahead and build it, I said. But you're going to do it without my money. At the end of the month, Barbara and Jason were evicted. Apparently, Jason hadn't been very forthcoming with her about the state of his finances. He had been living off my income for so long that he had no savings, and what Barbara had managed to scrape together wasn't enough to cover rent, let alone everything else. They ended up moving in with a friend of Barbara's, but that arrangement didn't last long. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from Barbara's social media, which I had stopped following but couldn't help but check from time to time, that they were bouncing from couch to couch, struggling to keep their heads above water. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Cutting them off financially lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I had more money, more time, and more peace of mind. I threw myself into work, poured my energy into Mason, and even began to reconnect with friends I'd drifted away from. It was like a cloud had lifted. But then, about 3 months after Jason left, Barbara showed up at my door. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. She was holding a shopping bag full of what I assumed were all her belongings, and her voice cracked as she began to speak. "Please," she said. "I need your help." I stood in the doorway, staring at her. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but curiosity got the better of me. "Help with what?" I asked. "Jason left me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He said I was too much of a burden and that he didn't sign up for this. I don't know where else to go." I couldn't help but laugh. The irony was too rich. She had betrayed me, broken up my family, and now she was standing on my porch begging me to bail her out. "I don't think so," I said. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." "But I didn't know it would be like this," she sobbed. "I thought we were happy. I thought." "You thought what?" I interrupted. "That you could steal my husband, live off my money, and everything would just magically work out. Welcome to the real world, Barbara. Actions have consequences." I closed the door before she could say another word. I could still hear her crying as I walked back into the living room, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. I blocked her number later that night. It happened on a Sunday morning. I had just finished making breakfast for Mason when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I thought it was a delivery or maybe one of the neighbors. But when I opened it, there was Jason, standing on my porch like a stray dog. He looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and there was a hollow look in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. For a moment I thought he might have been drinking, but when he started talking I realized he was sober and desperate. "Can we talk?" he asked. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "What do you have to say to me, Jason?" He let out a heavy sigh and ran a hand through his hair. "I screwed up," he said. "I see that now. I thought..." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I thought Barbara and I could make it work, but I was wrong. She's not what I thought she was." I stared at him, waiting for something more. He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. "I didn't realize how much you've done for me, for us. I took it all for granted and I'm ashamed of how I treated you. I want to make things right. For Mason, for us. Please, just give me another chance." For a moment, I was stunned by the sheer audacity of his request. This man who had betrayed me, disrespected me, and left me to pick up the pieces of our lives was now asking for forgiveness as if it were something I owed him. "No," I said firmly. "We're not doing this, Jason. You don't get to come crawling back after all you've done." His face fell. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right." I'll get a job, I'll dash. I cut him off. You don't have to do anything for me, Jason. What you do have to do is pay child support. That caught him off guard. Alimony? Yes, I said. You left me and Mason. You left me to fend for myself, and I did. But now it's your turn to contribute. Either you start paying child support, or I'm going to hire a lawyer. And believe me, Jason, the alimony option is the better choice for you. He blinked, obviously not expecting me to be so direct. But I don't have any money, he stammered. Then you'd better get some, I replied. Get a job, pick up extra shifts, sell something, I don't care how you do it. But I'm done being your safety net. If you don't step up, I'll make sure the courts force you to. Jason looked like he was about to argue, but then he must have realized he didn't have a leg to stand on. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, he muttered. I'll do it. Good, I said. And while we're at it, we need to finalize the divorce. You wanted out of the marriage, remember? So let's make it official. His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected me to bring it up. You really want a divorce? Absolutely, I said. We're done, Jason. There's no fixing this, and there's no going back. This is what you wanted, so own it. He didn't say much after that. I handed him a folder with the divorce papers I'd prepared months ago, told him to look them over, and said he'd hear from me soon about the alimony arrangement. Then I closed the door. As I walked back to the kitchen, I felt lighter, like I'd finally closed a chapter of my life that had been weighing me down. Mason was sitting at the table, happily munching on his toast, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. I kissed his head and smiled. Jason could keep his shame, his regrets, and his excuses. Mason and I didn't need him, we never did. Finalizing the divorce and handling the alimony was not as messy as I thought it would be, probably because Jason knew he didn't have a leg to stand on. He signed the papers without much of a fight, probably because he didn't want to risk a court battle that would end up costing him more than he could afford. The alimony agreement was simple. He had to contribute financially to Mason's upbringing and pay for some of the household expenses. The kicker was that Jason had finally gotten a job, nothing glamorous, just something stable enough to make his payments on time. For once, he was forced to pull his weight, even if it was legally required. And while I wasn't thrilled about having to see him every month, it was necessary for Mason. We agreed that he would see Mason once a month, always in neutral territory, and always with me there. I wasn't going to let Jason play Dad of the Year without supervision. To his credit, he treated Mason well. He was attentive during their visits, playing with him, listening to his stories, and genuinely trying to be a good father in those small, limited moments. I won't lie, sitting through those visits was uncomfortable. Watching Jason pretend he hadn't blown up our lives was infuriating, and I had to bite my tongue more than once to keep from snapping at him. But Mason adored him, and no matter what I thought of Jason, I couldn't take that away from my son. Meanwhile, Barbara was making her own attempts at reconciliation, though she didn't have the courage to do it directly. Instead, she went through our parents. One night I got a call from my mother. "Abigail," she said in that cautious tone she uses when she's about to ask for something she knows I won't like. "Don't you think it's time to move on from Barbara? She's your sister. She's been through a lot." "Been through a lot?" I asked, laughing bitterly. "She brought it on herself. She made a mistake," my mother said. "She's a victim of circumstance. You know how vulnerable she's always been. She's not a victim," I snapped. "She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. I'm not helping her anymore, and I'm certainly not forgiving her." "But Abigail," my father cut in, "you're so smart, so capable. You've always been the one to hold the family together. Can't you be the bigger person here?" I was stunned. It was as if they thought my intelligence made me a doormat, someone who should absorb any betrayal because I was strong enough to handle it. "No," I said firmly. "I'm done being the bigger person. I helped Barbara for years, and she repaid me by stabbing me in the back. I'm not paying her bills, and I'm not letting her back into my life. If you want to help her, that's your choice, but don't expect me to. That was the end of that conversation. For a while, my parents tried to guilt me, saying things like, "Family is everything, and you'll regret this one day." But eventually they stopped. I think they realized I wasn't going to budge. Barbara, on the other hand, didn't stop trying. She sent me messages on social media, emails, even a handwritten letter once, begging me to forgive her. She blamed Jason for everything, said he'd manipulated her, and claimed she missed having me in her life. But I didn't respond. For 8 months, I watched her flounder. She struggled to find work, and from what I heard, she bounced between living with friends and staying with our parents. It wasn't my problem anymore. One day, I blocked her completely. No more texts, no more emails, no more second-hand updates from my parents. She was out of my life forever. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. I just realized I didn't have the energy or desire to carry people who had proven they didn't deserve my support. I had to focus on Mason, my career, and my own peace of mind. Cutting Barbara off and managing the new co-parenting arrangement with Jason wasn't easy, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in years: control over my own life. Finalizing everything with Jason took months, but in the end I felt a huge sense of relief. The divorce was official, the alimony was set, and he was paying it reluctantly, of course, but he knew better than to test me after I got the court involved. We also agreed on his visitation with Mason, once a month, on neutral ground, and always with me present. I won't lie, those visits were awkward. Jason and I barely spoke, and I could tell he hated having me there as a buffer. But he treated Mason well, and Mason adored him, which made it tolerable. I'd do anything for my son, even if it meant sitting through an hour of tense conversation, while Mason played with his dad in the park. As for Barbara, I cut her off completely. She tried to reach me through every possible channel: phone calls, texts, social media, even emails. When I didn't respond, she went through our parents, who wasted no time guilting me. "She's your sister," my mother said during one particularly frustrating call. "She made a mistake, Abigail, but she's a victim of circumstance. Jason manipulated her." "Manipulated her?" I shot back. "She had a choice, Mom. She didn't have to sleep with my husband." "You're smart," my father chimed in. "You're above all this anger. Be the bigger person." I almost laughed. I am the bigger person. That's why I paid her rent for years while she couldn't get her life together. That's why I helped her every time she asked, even when it hurt me. But I'm done being her safety net. She can make it on her own. And with that, I ended the conversation. I wasn't interested in being guilted into forgiveness, and I certainly wasn't interested in helping Barbara financially. Cutting her off had been the best decision I'd made in years, and I had no intention of going back. A few months later, my parents told me that Jason and Barbara were back together. Apparently, they'd kept it a secret, probably because they knew how pathetic it made them look. My parents talked about it as if it were some great tragedy, as if I should be heartbroken or outraged. I wasn't. "Good for them," I said, brushing it off. "They deserve each other." And I meant it. Let them have their drama-filled lives together. I didn't care. I was too busy being happy. You see, in the midst of all the chaos, something unexpected had happened. I met someone. His name is Mark, and he's everything Jason never was: kind, thoughtful, reliable. He actually listens when I talk and makes me feel seen. He brings me flowers just because, not as a half-hearted apology after a fight. Mason loves him too. Mark is patient and funny, always ready to play catch or build Legos, and he treats Mason like he's his own son. Watching them together fills my heart in a way I didn't know was possible. For the first time in years, I feel like a woman again. I'm not working 12-hour days anymore, and I've stopped carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Mark reminds me that it's okay to lean on someone, that I don't have to do it all alone. Jason may be Mason's biological father, but Mark is the kind of man I want Mason to look up to. And as far as I'm concerned, Barbara and Jason can have their messy, secret relationship. I'm too busy living my best life to care. A few weeks ago, I ran into Jason and Barbara. It wasn't planned. I was at the grocery store with Mason, picking up some snacks for a movie night, and there they were, standing near the frozen food aisle. Barbara froze when she saw me, her eyes darting between Jason and me as if waiting for some kind of confrontation. Jason looked uncomfortable too, but he managed a stiff nod. Mason, blissfully unaware of the tension, waved to his dad. "Hi, Daddy." Jason waved back, but I barely acknowledged him. I just smiled at Mason and said, "Come on, buddy, let's go get your popcorn." Then I walked away without giving either of them another look. It wasn't until I got to the checkout line that I realized how significant that moment was. A year ago, seeing them together would have made my blood boil. I would have felt angry, betrayed, maybe even humiliated. But now, I felt nothing. No anger. No pain. No resentment. Just peace. As Mason chatted about the movie we were going to see, I realized how far I'd come. Jason and Barbara could live their little secret life together, hiding in the shadows and worrying about what other people thought of them. I didn't need revenge or apologies or even closure from them, because I'd already won. I had Mason, I had Mark, and I had a life full of love and joy and possibility. Jason and Barbara were now just a footnote in my story, one I didn't feel the need to revisit. That's when I knew, without a doubt, that I was finally free.